Hello, and welcome to another episode of Goblin Lore. This episode, we talk to Mike Lawton, a high school teacher in my hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and somebody that I was really excited to talk to for quite a while because of his role in starting a magic club at his high school. It's an incredible program and one that's been long running now for 3 or 4 years. Mike has done great work with his students, and we get into not only how education plays into the lore of Magic the Gathering, but also what Mike does and why it's so important that kids are taught magic and taught through magic. And so this gets to, I'm going to use my whole intro time here to implore you to get in contact with Mike at Mike Wildspeaker on Twitter. And if you have any extra magic cards, magic supplies, any sort of things that you can help donate to his high school's club, it would be so greatly appreciated so that he can help continue to fuel this program. You know, teachers are not the wealthiest people in the world, and a lot of the startup for Mike's club came out of his own pockets and his own collections. So please help him out any way that you can. If there's a way that we can help get supplies to Milwaukee, we will absolutely do that. So get in contact with us if that's a concern as well. But I think it's a great cause, and teachers and the cause of education are very near and dear to the hearts of all the goblins on this cast. So, without any further ado, let's get to the show.
Hello, Podwalkers, and welcome to another episode of Goblin Lore. This episode is, we are into like the mid-20s, and that is a scary thought. We're getting to like our reckless phase of our podcast age. And
I mean, the podcast can now drink legally.
As goblins, isn't our reckless phase the moment of birth?
I like that. That is a good thought.
I mean, I guess it is kind of fitting then, if we're talking about recklessness, that I am just cracking this entire box while we're recording tonight.
This one goes right out to you, Marshall Sutcliffe. Shout out. And with that in mind, with all of the fun and joy around here, with we're cutting up, but that's because we've got somebody else, to keep us on the straight and narrow and help guide our gentle developing minds, and that is a special guest, Mike Lawton. Mike Lawton is a high school science teacher in Milwaukee Public Schools. Mike is coming on to talk to us, especially though, because he's been running an extracurricular Magic the Gathering and Games Club for 6 years now. So Mike has been involved in Magic for more than 20 years, and Mike is here to talk to us about how he runs the Magic Club. He's here to talk to us about schools in Magic lore, and really, I mean, let's be honest, we're here to learn, and that's not a pun. So, Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Before we get into our typical intro question section, Mike, you did specifically bring up to us that you wanted to share your favorite piece of Magic flavor text. Did you want to share that with us now? Yeah,
for sure. So, I'll tell you that, and then it'll kind of let you know a little bit about who I am. And my favorite flavor text is the creature Horseshoe Crab. It's a common, originally printed in Urza's Saga, and it's a 1/3 crab with the active ability of paying a blue mana to untap it. And the flavor text reads, "In the final days before the disaster, all the crabs on Tolaria migrated from the inlets, streams, and ponds back to the sea. No one took note."
Aw, poor little crabs. No one paid any attention
No,
to
the
that?
crabs made it.
Well, yeah, but no one cared. There was no cheering squad for the crabs? Are you kidding me?
It also gets at what I love about science. It's it marvels at things that people overlook. There's so much going on we haven't observed yet that we can't explain and we haven't studied. There's always more. And there's a quote I love to tell at the start of my classes I teach every year. I'm a science teacher, and I ask the class, hey, do we know what aspirin does? And, some students will answer with what they think it does. And the answer is generally, yeah, of course we know what aspirin does. And then I lay this quote on them. That's, the National Library of Medicine has more than 23,000 scientific papers on aspirin, with 880 published this year alone on the various aspects of its potential use. So in science, there's always things to learn, always things to study. And people don't necessarily realize that. They think, yeah, everything, we know everything there is to know about aspirin. It's just a matter of learning these facts, and it's super boring. But according to science, there's infinite things to learn. We never totally know what everything does.
And I would say that dovetails really well with the purpose of our show, honestly. I mean, that's kind of what we always hope to do, is dig into bits of magic lore and dig into parts of our society and magic community in general, and, see what we can learn from each other and how we can gain more experience and more knowledge about the world. So I think this is a good fit already. I think I might switch from auditing the class to full enrollment at this point.
Nice. Thanks for supporting the institution.
I do have to ask, Mike, do you teach like general science? Are you biology? Do you have any specific focus of like what you specifically teach or even are just interested in for science?
I teach biology and chemistry. I'm licensed in those. I haven't taught chemistry in a while. I kind of miss parts of it because it was kind of fun and explodey, and that's always like good stuff.
You are a friend of the cast.
Yeah, experimental frenzy. That's what we're about.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I teach biology in as a freshman class, and then at a college level class that they can take an exam and get college credit for potentially.
Well, so why don't we leap right in and on brand, on theme for this week's podcast, I need everyone to get out their number 2 pencils, and you are going to be filling out this short survey. The question of the week is, if you could pick one Magic the Gathering character to take a class from, who would you choose and what would they teach? You're looking at that college registration course guide, and this is the class that leaps out to you. Who's teaching it, and what are they teaching? Let's start with you.
I'm jumping in right away because of my eagerness and the fact that I already accidentally ate my number 2 pencil. I am Hobbes Q, and I can be found on Twitter at Hobbes Q. And that's mainly because I'm starving today, and I'm hungry. And you all know, I mean, we've seen my culinary exploits and enjoyment that I get from Twitter. I love to post my photos. So I'm actually taking a class by, we'll just say Azemore, which is what it's been shortened to. But this is referenced on 3 cards, the best of which is obviously Sauté. But Azemore is the writer of the Underworld Cookbook. Teaching us how to prepare beebles and gargoyles. And I just think that would be the class that I would most take in Magic, the world. Yeah, in Magic Multiverse.
I always like that flavor text on Granite Gargoyle, talking about you need the right tools to carve up a gargoyle, but if you do, it's a delicacy. There's something so decadent and indulgent about a work of art that you're going to eat.
I am Alex Newman, found at Twitter. On Twitter at Alexander New M, and I think the person I would pick as a teacher would be Tamio. I've talked a little bit in the past about how her magic casting with stories was the coolest part of Return to Innistrad to me, and I've loved storytelling and things, and I think Tamio would make probably the best history teacher. Like, that would just be incredible experience. So that's my answer.
Good choice. Love it.
You could actually live the history too with her magic.
Yeah,
that's the coolest part.
Yeah.
Our cherished guest, what would you like to take it on?
So I would want to train in Heromancy with Gideon. And the reason is because I coach wrestling at the school as well. I'm an assistant wrestling coach there, and sometimes I honestly visualize in my mind Heromancy when I get thrown really hard and I'm just totally exhausted, and okay, there's flashes of golden magic helping me endure a really rough, match or practice. And it's really what you have to do to be a successful wrestler is ignore fatigue, ignore fear, exert yourself even when you're at your just utter complete exhaustion. And oftentimes a wrestling match comes down to which wrestler can do that for longer.
I'm Joe Redeman, your host. You can find me on Twitter at Findhorn. That's FYND Horn. And the class that I know that I would be taking is the Ethics of Humanity. And I'm pretty sure that class would be taught by Urza Planeswalker.
Wow.
Well, I think he's got a lot of really interesting points and to consider and research that he's done on, genetic engineering, on, population control,
on renewable energy sources
that happen to be people.
That happen to be places where people used to live.
Yeah, so he's got a lot of interesting points that I think can be brought up. I don't think I would ever agree with him. It would be a very frustrating class to take. But that's education. I think is sometimes about pushing your boundaries. Let's also be honest right here. Urza would lose his teaching license immediately.
Yeah, because he'd start doing genetic experiments with
the students.
But I think this is the problem here.
Academy.
He didn't lose his teaching license. As far as we can tell.
Acquire funding.
In fairness, I don't think Dominaria has a teaching.
Yeah, there was no Board of Education on Tolaria, which I think is a huge oversight they missed there.
So, we're talking Urza versus the Board of Education was not a legal case that the Supreme Court on Dominaria saw?
It should have been. It should have been, and that was the problem. Well, with our discussions of really interesting teaching philosophies and teaching histories, I chose Urza for a reason, not just because I think that would be a hilarious class, but because a lot of the school that we see happening in Magic's storyline is, the Tolarian Academy, which is on the island of Tolaria on Dominaria. And that's kind of where most of the formal schooling takes place in Magic's storyline. Just to give a general overview of school systems in Magic, there really aren't a ton. That's just not a part of the world building that we've really seen, over the course of the 25 plus years now of Magic's story. It's a lot more of a medieval sort of apprentice journeyman master sort of teaching model, which, fits the typical sort of fantasy narrative. But there are a few of these sort of conclave academy type things, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about for our lore part of today. And so let's just start with the OG Tolarian Academy, the original, down home, I guess Harvard of Dominaria, basically.
Looking back on it, the artistic direction of the Tolaria Academy is really interesting to me. I was in high school when that set came out, and the Academy had this very sort of, looking at it now, Harry Potter and steampunk kind of aesthetic to it before those things were really popularized. There's the omnipresent goggles on all these characters at the Academy. There's armor that's more like this retro, futuro, techno gadget overlay on traditional wizard fantasy stuff. And I think it's a comparatively high watermark for embracing whimsical things in mainstream Magic sets, the main block sets, and it's oftentimes, especially recently, kept at arm's length. Urza's block was full of hijinks and disruptive students battling stern proctors and big books and beebles.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great segue into this. So Tolarian Academy is an academy for wizards, specifically wizards, the classic blue magic casters, that was founded by Urza and Barrin, who was a blue wizard, on the island of Tolaria. And so this, I think there have been two iterations of the original Tolarian Academy. The first one sort of trained some of our most notable legends throughout Magic's history. So Teferi, who became a Planeswalker and has been featured most recently in the Dominaria set and storyline. He's going to keep being a recurring character, it seems, as the Gatewatch continues on with their quest to save the multiverse. Joyra, who was the original captain of the Weatherlight and then became the most recent captain of the new Weatherlight. Urtai is another important one. He was the wizard on the crew of the original Weatherlight and then got left in wrath, and I'm sure we'll talk more about Urtai some other time. It's just, he did not have a good time in that whole plot. And then Hannah, who is the daughter of Barrin and was more of an artificer, and she was the engineer, one of the engineers of the original Weatherlight. She was working the engine and a member of the crew. And so the Academy was not only like a training ground for young wizards, it was also, like a research facility. It was kind of our classic sort of collegiate model where, yes, they're teaching kids. Yes, they're helping, students gain knowledge, but there are also people there doing big, crazy projects and just seeing what they can make happen. And so like you were talking about, Mike, they were messing around with time manipulation. Urza actually created a time traveling device. They discovered slow time water that could let mortals live vastly extended lifespans, which Barrin used. His wife Rain, who is the chancellor of the Academy, used it. Joyra, I think, accidentally got dunked into it, and so that's why she's been able to live like thousands of years now into the current day of Magic the Gathering and the new Dominaria set. Eugenics was a part of that. They, Urza created the Metathran, these blue soldier people. The Bloodline Project, where he essentially engineered the birth of his legacy weapon central piece, Gerard Capation. He built Titan engines, which were the weapons that he used to invade Phyrexia. Soul Bombs, which was another part of that. And then, of course, building the Weatherlight. And so that's kind of the broad overview. It's very much like a classic, if you're in the US, it's a Big Ten sort of university research facility model,
with a little bit of the sort of Black Ops underbelly, except it was all Urza. But like a lot of those things that Urza was doing were secret projects that only some people were aware of what was going on, and like the time travel thing was one of the big disasters. Though I don't think the only disaster, because Urza, which is a thing we will definitely talk about.
Yeah, the Manhattan Project with the nuclear pile underneath the University of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to go a bit into that, the time rift disaster there, Alex? I think that's a great place to jump
talk
in.
a little about that just a little bit. So, like Karn, that we know of as a planeswalker in the current day, he's tied to Mirrodin and New Phyrexia. He was actually created by Urza as part of this time travel project, where Urza was using the Academy to attract the brightest minds and the best mages so that he could try to fight Phyrexia. And one of these things was this time travel project where he was going to send Karn back in time, because for some reason Silver could go back in time. That's just kind of part of the hand wavy, how the story works, how the world works in this place. But so he was going to make Karn he made this golem who was going to go back in time and stop Phyrexia. I can't remember the exact details of what event he thought he was going to just tinker with to stop, but that was his plan. And of course something exploded, which caused all these time rifts to created a rift and also created all these little time pockets. So there was fast time and there was slow time, and things were all moving at a really bad way. At some point, like, some Phyrexians who were going to attack the facility got caught in a period of fast time, which created a whole nother disaster, because now there's these Phyrexians that are literally created to adapt, that are given the ability to see everything that's coming to attack them in slow motion, so they can adapt to any threat that is approaching. And so just compounding disasters because Urza was involved, and that had to finally get dealt with. Ultimately, the facility still lasted until the actual Phyrexian invasion. Then at that time, how much... Did you have anything else you wanted to add about that, Joe?
Well, yeah. So it was the Phyrexians in that time bubble did escape it and attacked the facility, attacked Tolaria, and in that battle, Joyru was killed, and then the academy was destroyed.
Right.
And then 10 years later, Karn and Urza and Barrin come back to rebuild Tolaria. So this is Tolaria 2, basically, Electric Boogaloo. And Karn had used Urza's time machine to go back and save Joyra. So they found Joyra still alive because wibbly wobbly timey wimey things. He prevented the event of her death in the past, and then it, resonated and rippled forward, and that created the rift, the actual time rift that they had to seal later on in Time Spiral. But Joyra was still alive. Teferi, who they hadn't seen, was trapped in a slow time bubble, and so he hadn't aged at all, basically. And then eventually they got him out, they rebuilt the academy, and then the Phyrexian invasion happens not long after, and exciting things happen, and the academy is leveled again, but this time it's by Barrin, the headmaster of the academy, because the Phyrexians used Tolaria as another flashpoint to attack during this invasion, and when Barrin had found out that his daughter Hana had died, he essentially evacuated... He evacuated some of the students, I think. I don't remember actually if there was like a full evacuation of the facility, which is kind of messed up. But he was livid with Urza for getting his daughter killed and putting her into the middle of his, crazy plan. And he was livid with his life's work being squandered as just another chess piece in Urza's game. And so he leveled the entire academy and killed himself in this explosion, and destroyed all of the research they had. In this explosion, had destroyed all the research that they had built over, thousands of years, basically. And or I guess maybe not thousands, but like at least probably 100 years. And so that was the end of Tolaria 2.
Yeah.
Which was one of the things I love is the Kev Walker art for that, followed by that flavor text. Just for his family, Barrin made a funeral pyre of Tolaria. Like he did. He burned it to the ground. But that art is incredible art.
And that's the card Obliterate.
Mm-hmm.
From
the card is
Invasion.
Obliterate, yeah.
And I just realized you have to look at the Invasion to get that flavor text. They sort of genericized... Well, I guess just the 8th edition when they put different flavor text on, but kept the art.
Yeah,
oddly
which
enough.
makes no sense. But no, the art is just beautiful art and is got that great flavor text on both the from the Vault version and the original.
Before he did that, he buried both his wife and his daughter, and then that's when he decided to just take the whole thing out and all the Phyrexians and everything that was there, and just now it's gone.
Yep. Yeah. So, the grand experiment of Tolaria ended in not great fashion, but nowadays in the present Dominaria, sort of the philosophies of the founders of that school have been carried forward. So we do now see that there are 5 splinter Tolarian Academies on Dominaria. We saw this in the present day Dominaria storyline when we met Joda, who has also been around for forever and is one of the very few characters in Magic the Gathering not a planeswalker to be basically immortal. Joda is the headmaster of the Tolaria West facility in the Spice Isles, which is an island chain not far from the original Tolaria. There is a Tolarian Academy at Latnam, which is formerly where the School of the Unseen and the College of Latnam were, back in the Ice Age, which is where Joda originated as well. Orvada, near the Burning Isles, is another one. There is Tolaria of the Depths, underwater at the Aruns, where the original Tolaria stood. I'm assuming that's mostly like a merfolk type of facility. Like, I'm not sure who goes to school there. Maybe the Homerids. Maybe they're getting into Magic these days.
Yeah.
But and then there's a Shadow Academy that apparently doesn't have a particular location, and some have theorized that it might be some sort of pocket dimension. I like to imagine it's like, you know, wherever 3 are assembled, there we shall be, sort of thing. But yeah, so those are the 5 facilities, and there actually have been 5 philosophies carried on down that, you know, people, it's kind of the 5 majors, I guess, at the Tolarian Academies these days. Urzans, who focus on artifice, temporal mechanics, time manipulation, and genetics. Barrinites, who are much more humane and ethical, focus on, you know, classic sorcery, administration. Rainians, who focus on the improvement of artifacts and recruitment to the facilities. Then this is less of an official major, I guess, and more of like you can minor in it on your own time. It's like a self-designed. It's the Society of Mishra, who are a secret cult of Phyrexian sympathizers, not great people. And a strain of scientists who perform illegal genetic experiments called the Gathans. Who originated from Gotha, who was another person at the original Tolaria. So, yeah, that's kind of where Tolaria has evolved to these days. We were joking before, but really, I think they would benefit greatly from having like a board of directors, or like, you know, a board of education, or like being funded by taxpayers of Dominaria, because there is no accountability for what happens at these schools.
Yeah.
Like, who's the superintendent of this? They need to be fired immediately.
I mean, I think for me, I actually just want to go to the sporting events between these teams.
Just start funneling all the educational funds into athletics.
Yeah, I mean, who are the boosters on this planet, too?
Just trying to picture how anyone would compete with the Gathans.
Yeah, well, you can't even do like drug testing on them because they found a way around it.
Well, yeah, of course. But see, I suppose the Rainians and the Urzans probably have some artifice too, so maybe that's just it's just an arms race at that point.
With the Gathans, it might be a literal arms race.
Yeah, how many arms can they stick on? I mean, but you said it. There is no board. You know, there's no taxpayers, so they may not care what substances people are using.
And just like the current world, it seems like there's almost no support for the actual arts.
No, that's a good point. Wow.
Sorry, Joe.
I mean, how does education relate to the greater economy? Has that ever been spelled out anywhere? You know, is it sort of anybody can sort of apply to get in here, or are people entitled to any kind of education, or is it more of a medieval thing where it's this very cloistered passing on of information in a very limited way?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think there is any answer to that. I know that, it seems to be like a school where most of their budget comes from tuition. Like, if you can afford to go, you go. I don't know if they have any sort of like scholarship programs, like I remember when I was applying for colleges, I shot one application out to Yale because I was like, why not? Let's see if I can get in. And like if I had qualified to get in, they would have like paid for a full ride because of whatever socioeconomic bracket my family fell into, and I think they would have taken pity on me as a poor Midwestern boy, going out to the East Coast. And so maybe they'll have like one token Keldon there every year that they like give a full scholarship to. I'm not sure.
Nothing but a bunch of 1% legacy students at Tolarian Academy.
Legacy weapon students?
I mean,
Yeah,
Wow. That makes me so happy.
and it is.
It's not far off from the
Okay.
truth.
I was gonna say, from what I've seen, we haven't really seen any information about that too much, especially in the Dominaria storyline. The only school that I know of that had anything like that was the School of the Unseen, when I read the kind of the Ice Age books, and that one was very much the cloistered school that their knowledge is secret, and you have to kind of know they exist to even go and apply, and in that sort of medieval, not even really guilds, because it wasn't a publicly known thing. That's why it's in the name, School of the Unseen.
This actually does seem to be more of the Ivy League of Dominaria. Honestly, is you have to know somebody who knows somebody to get in there, and skull, like a whole Skull and Bones type thing. That's what the fraternity is? Is that what they're called? Skull and Bones?
Yes.
Okay.
The one that Bush and Kerry and or whoever all those people belong to.
Yeah, all the rich politician people.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yep. I mean, I guess the in opposition to that would be, and maybe you can talk a little bit to this, Mike, is sort of the public school education of Dominaria. Is that sort of like we were saying, apprentice, journeyman, master type system, which is a little, it's not quite the whole, the public schools that we see today in the real world where everyone's entitled to the same education, but it's the closest thing you get to an access point where we see people finding mentors in, whether it be in their trade, in their craft, or in their school of magic. And we see that, for instance, with Chandra and Jaya, with, Siddhar Kondo, who was Gerard's father and mentor, adoptive father and mentor. You could maybe talk to that for a bit?
Yeah, I mean the education system on Dominaria, seems to have kind of that medieval feel to it, where not everybody can get in on it, and maybe your talents can get noticed by some of these people who could potentially be your mentors, and you end up in this or that sort of trade. But it seems like the institutions of education are very selective, and it makes them vulnerable to the loss of knowledge. And I think that's a kind of a trope that they play with a lot. That these schools can be destroyed and the knowledge lost forever. I think there's something that fascinates us about that. You have your Library of Alexandria, and who knows what was in there, and we have fragments of things that say, oh yeah, here's a clip from this book in the Library of Alexandria, and it's like, oh wow, here's this theorem that was figured out way long ago, and what else was in that book, and nobody knows because the school was lost. And so we have these schools, and the schools seem to get destroyed a lot, and maybe that's why they're perpetually in a medieval time period.
Yeah,
that's a fair point.
It's kind of funny, but it's also kind of true. It's in a lot of. It's a thing that's not really tackled a lot in fantasy. Like you have this perpetual sort of medieval, dark ages, depending on kind of where how the world is set up, and it's a thing that's not really talked about a lot as to why things haven't advanced. And when it does show up, it's sometimes like that, where it's literally there's a suppressive force that's just decided we're going to stay here. I'm not going to go any further, and they just destroy and make sure that no one does the research, no one does learning, and they destroy anything that goes beyond a certain point.
I'm pretty sure I heard Mark Rosewater comment on that it's any ideas that bring the game very far out of that medieval trope that it's in, he's not about. We're not going to see big mecha warriors and rocket launchers and guns and any of those kinds of things, which you could completely do with the game. But apparently he quashes those kinds of ideas to keep it grounded in this thoroughly fantasy world that we've had for 25 years. And that's something I very much agree with. I enjoy that a lot about the game.
Yeah. And it's...
It would be. I think there is an interesting idea, though, of what would, I think you're 100% right. That similar sort of cultural feel to that medieval, high fantasy type thing does keep that vibe there of this is, a world outside of our own. But I think we've seen worlds where, there is some progress or there is some element of our modern day that fits into it. And it's kind of cool to see those little elements reflected. Like, on Kaladesh, for instance, we do see technological progression, and that's kind of cool. That's an interesting thing to witness that being reflected. I wonder if we would ever see, what a world that has a fleshed out education system, what that would look like, that isn't just a civilization that lives in, like on Ixalan, we just had, conquistador Spain for the vampires. We had, the Mesoamericans in their, flat top pyramids. We had merfolk who literally just live in the rivers, and then dinosaurs. Oh yeah, and pirates. And so there's like no infrastructure anywhere. I mean, like Torazone, the vampires, the vampires' capital is the only place that has some sort of like something that vaguely looks like a civilization that we could notice. I mean, we're on Ravnica right now, so I wonder, like, what do the Ravnican kids do all day? Or is this like Oliver Twist where they're all in factories? And like, what are they? Where are they? Do they go to school? What do they learn at school? I don't know. I would just be fascinated to find that out.
And I don't know that they've talked about that specifically yet, or that they necessarily will this time around, but I can say the stories, and I haven't caught up on them yet, but the last several weeks, they've all been sort of vignette stories talking about the common random dock worker who just how their life is on Ravnica, and kind of how the guilds intersect with that in positive and negative ways. And so it's very possible that as they develop this world, or they pick a different world to start to do that more granular world building, that we might see something more details about an education system, something like that come up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the thing that keeps societies in a similar level of technological progress is big steps backwards in technology. And whether it's because of some ecological disaster or a war, and a lot of times, we're seeing civilizations in decline. And, in our lives, that has not been the case. But for the vast majority of human history, it's oscillated in terms of, scientific progress going up and down.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that Wizards and probably the game of Magic struggles with is us being dropped into a society that is flourishing does not make for good storytelling. If there's not conflict of some sort, we don't really have stakes, or it's harder to make those stakes. Whereas I think we are seeing with the shifts, with especially the Ravnica storyline, that people would be more interested in knowing maybe what an education system looks like.
So that kind of brings us to our real world topic, and this is what we have you here for today, Mike, is to talk about your high school's Magic Club. And so why don't you start us off with, telling us about how the club started? What were your ideas behind bringing Magic to your students? Why Magic of all things?
So a colleague and I started the club, and I think it was 2012. And we're both gamers and really into it. We've played, games with each other and our families leading up to this. And we decided to create the club. And we wanted to make a space for students to just enjoy all the multifaceted benefits of gaming. We wanted to bring the benefits of gaming to what are, for the most part, underrepresented demographics in the board game, card game world. Our school is mostly African American, not overwhelmingly. It's really a great melting pot of our Milwaukee community. It's got African Americans and Latinos and whites, and there's a big Hmong population, and that's all represented in the club as well. They all come and play games and D&D, and I teach and play a bunch of Magic. I just gravitated towards Magic because I especially love that game. We have lots of other board games there that are played a lot, and a D&D group that does campaigns. But I just love introducing people to this game that are the age that I was when I got into it. It's such a vast, complex universe, and people are grabbed for it for so many different reasons. There's so much going on. There's the art of it, and there's the lore, and there's the competitiveness, or the deck building, or the min-maxing of every little bit of it. I love seeing kids discover what they love about this game. In the beginning, I supplied all the stuff for Magic, and I ran out of all my Fallen Empires bulk pretty fast. Bought a lot of that when I was in high school. But, my old cards, I just kind of gave away the bulk stuff I had. And, only some of the kids have access to a great deal of the game financially. And it really broke my heart to see kids really limited by that, and you get the kid who's got like a fat allowance, or the kid who's got a job, and they're coming and bringing these awesome decks, and the other kids that can't do that for whatever reason are really bummed out. So I started reaching out to the community, starting with people I knew personally, and then people I met on Twitter, and I found their generosity to be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, no, it's a great community for helping out, when you need something like that. And that's kind of how we got in touch. Is I started putting out a call similarly. I wanted to start a club for kids up here in Minneapolis, and found out you were doing the same thing and had been doing it for multiple years, which is so great to see. I'm curious too. Did you find that when you had that disparity of kids bringing great decks because they could afford the better cards and all that stuff, did that dissuade you from doing more constructed type things into something a little more egalitarian like draft? Did you ever consider format in that, or were you just sort of trying to find ways to help everybody up themselves to be on that same playing field?
More the latter. I mean, it's a lot of total pure kitchen table Magic that's played there, where you just bring what you got, and everybody's at totally different levels. It's a different group of kids every time we have the club, so you never know what you're going to get. I mean, as far as constructed formats, Commander is far and away the favored constructed format, and aside from that, it's mostly just kitchen table stuff and kids bringing what they have. And if kids get get access to some funds, they usually buy a pre-con Commander deck and start rocking that, and adding on to it when they can, and that's what you get there.
I mean, I was thinking too that one of the things wasn't sure if you tried, and this kind of comes to the learning aspect of it and kind of social and emotional development, but when we're talking a little bit about bringing in something like multiplayer formats, or something that may allow for some of that cooperation, but also working together to overcome what is perceived, at least, as a stronger deck based on either financial or just stronger deck building, as a way to kind of mediate some of that?
Yeah, that's a challenge, and the constructed nature of the format is just the cards are what they are, right? And what I try to model and teach a lot is positive interactions regardless of what's going on in the game. Having everybody have a good time and playing fairly and not letting that ruin anybody's time. And I feel like I do a very good job of that. It's something I consciously think about constantly at the club.
So, out of curiosity, does the Magic Club tie into your curriculum at all? Do you tie, how do you tie learning targets like that, social emotional type stuff into the club? What sort of thought process do you have about, bringing specific learning goals in, or is it much more of like you want to facilitate an environment where kids come and play and just naturally engage?
I don't tie my in-class curriculum into Magic. I promote the game in class and I talk about it. I've decorated my room with a bunch of Magic art and Funko Pops and posters and cool stuff like that. I actually just got a bunch of store props donated from my LGS. Shout out to Board Game Barrister, and they're I'm trying to figure out how to put this 4 foot tall Teferi up in my room. I'm really excited about that. But when I'm teaching biology, I focus on biology. And as far as the club itself, I try to develop the students definitely their social development, their emotional development, make it a welcoming, accepting space for anybody that comes through the door, and make sure that's happening all the time for everybody. Just have a place that kids can play and be themselves. That's something I didn't get when I was in high school. I played at lunch or played at recess and stuff. And if I'd have had a teacher that not only said like it's okay that you can play Magic in the school, but celebrate playing Magic in the school and promote it, and reward you for doing so. That would have been a game changer for me.
Have you had any hitches with fostering that with kids? I mean, high school, obviously, you got a lot more. I think kids at that age tend to be a lot more socially savvy. They know how to engage with each other, and I'm sure a lot of these kids are friends outside of school as well. But have you had any a tough time sort of bringing those kids together, or are you finding that this is a space and that Magic's something that they can easily bond over, that they can easily negotiate through?
I haven't had a ton of trouble with it, but I think it's because I put a lot of effort into keeping it a positive place. A big part of what's rewarding about teaching Magic and running this club is being able to shape these formative experiences for the better. In the club, I'm huge on playing honestly and never cheating and being a good sports person. Teenagers struggle with these kinds of things. There's a lot of research on that stuff, right? They're often poor at reading each other's emotions and responding appropriately, and they tend to be way more impulsive. They have less impulse control, and they'll decide to cheat or say something mean, for example. And what I do is more than anything try to model appropriate behavior. I make sure that I'm inclusive and I respond positively to people's emotions, and I'm really patient. And I play the game honestly and compliment people and turn mistakes into lessons. Teenagers make fun of each other a lot, right? And they're very self-conscious. And playing Magic is a really easy thing to get self-conscious about, right? Because you can easily make a mistake and feel embarrassed about it, and somebody can point out that the thing you did was clearly wrong, and and so when somebody says something negative in that situation, I reframe it, I guess. I say, yeah, we all make this mistake a lot at first, but once you realize and kind of it helps them empathize with each other and realize we're all in this together to make this positive space. At the start of the club, I very explicitly, lay out that these are expectations, and everybody's coming at it with different levels. Some students learn the game very slowly, and some pick it up and go really far, and then they're reading deck texts and articles and taking it to the next level, and I try to get them to mentor each other.
I was just gonna ask about that. Have you found that they've started to like work together on whether it's deck techs or like coaching each other through certain plays or?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can all benefit from hearing that lesson. That we all went through this learning curve of Magic, because it's just such a hugely complicated, difficult game, and we all have more learning to go. And don't be negative to anyone who is making their own journey through that. We all had somebody who took the time to explain things about this extremely complex game. It might be somebody in person that was your best friend, or it might be a content creator that laid out all these strategies and level by level, right, and helped you along. And so be that person for the next player. Be the one that takes the time to patiently explain something to them, and turn it into a really positive experience instead of just no, I'm just going to wreck you in this game and make fun of how poor of a player you are. We want a community that's like that. That's going to be welcoming and inclusive and honest and help each other out. And that's how the game's going to grow and survive.
Mike, and I'm kind of curious, like, how did you go about teaching Magic? I mean, I'm guessing when you started this club that this wasn't necessarily a game that you came into that you had half the class or half the group already knew how to play.
Yeah, there's a few that did, and they immediately gravitated towards the club. But I mean, a ton of what I spend my time doing at the club is teaching the game, and I can go into that whole process. Yeah, especially at the start of the year, I spend tons and tons of time teaching Magic over and over to kids that come through the door, and I encourage other people to be an ambassador to the game and teach other people how to play Magic. And it's definitely a skill that you can go about it a way that makes the person you're trying to teach turned off to the game or turned on to the game. This first impression is really important. You just have to keep in mind that when you're teaching somebody Magic, your primary objective isn't to actually teach Magic. It's to have the person have fun and want to play the game again. They have their whole life to learn the game, but you just want them to have a fun time the first time that you do it. One of the things I do is, I really like the welcome decks that Wizards makes. They're an awesome product that they've put together that are these low complexity decks. And so I go to my LGS and I get lots of those. And I always like to give the person that I'm teaching a deck of cards. And, so I'll take out the welcome decks that's got the 5 colors. And the first thing I do is explain what the color pie is. And that's, I think, one of the most elegant, beautiful parts of the design of the game is the color pie, right? And so I tell them, okay, so white is all about healing and protection and civilization and soldiery, and red is about fire and emotion and chaos, and whatever resonates with them, they're already picking out a deck and they're emotionally invested in the game.
You're giving them choices to start with. Yeah, I mean, and your choices are based on what we're going to kind of see as more the pro-social aspects of each color. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So many other games, right? It's just like, oh, okay, I'm the orange meeple, That's it.
But in this one, the orange means something.
Yeah. Exactly, right? It's so customizable. You've made tons of choices way before you even sit down to play with somebody. And so what kind of grabs somebody is like they're not just making a a random choice. They're making a choice that sort of represents their identity in some way. They're already unique. I think all of us, when we first sort of learned Magic, we latched onto a color at first, right? I'm the green mage, and I'm gonna trade for all the green cards, and I think we all kind of go through that phase, right? And then if somebody asks you what kind of deck you have, you say, I have a green deck, and people know that you're where you're at on the game, but because it's such an attractive thing to buy into and to identify with.
It's that easy, like, this is me, this is who I am. I mean, that's why I have a Magic shirt that has YOLO with the red mana symbol as the O. Like, it's perfect.
And I've got a shirt that says boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the deeper we get into the Vorthos, right? I mean, we fall in love with these characters, and because we relate to them or find their stories fascinating or compelling, and it's the same process, I guess, just with more time to look at it.
I will say the welcome decks have been amazing for this. I, a couple of years ago, started a group teaching in a kind of a milieu-based psychology program at the VA where I worked, and Wizards donated a bunch of the welcome decks to us, and this is exactly how I went about teaching it to the group of veterans that I was working with. It was just this idea that one or two had played before, most people hadn't, but the welcome decks were just a great way that somebody was going to be able to have something to take home with them after they got done. And it's amazing, because if you think of Magic players are entitled people at times when it comes to cards and free things, and the value is, those welcome decks have no value, forgetting that the value simply to somebody who's never played is that they left with now being able to play a game and
absolutely
take something home with them.
Yeah, and keep looking at it if they're compelled by it. Just having this artifact of your experience is great, right? And they're probably not going to throw it away, right? They're going to get to hold on to it, and that's something that can keeps them coming back.
You mentioned the Teferi that you have in your classroom now, and I know that as you were talking about.
Not yet, but soon. Gotta get them over there.
Gotcha. Well, and I know that you were talking about your kids that you don't usually see some of these demographics represented as heavily in the Magic the Gathering scene. Mostly being kids of color. I'm not sure if you have any young women in your club, but those are also underrepresented as well. But specifically talking about young African American boys. Teferi is kind of the closest representation in the main storyline that they would have. Do you find that he's a character that some of your students have inquired about or identified with or anything like that? And how does representation play into your kids getting attached to Magic?
Yeah, representation is huge, and the design of the game has taken the absolutely right turn in that direction. And so I'll share a story about that. That was sort of what led to that tweet you referred to. That's my most liked tweet, I think, that I've had. And so the students love playmats, and I don't get a lot of them. They're I actually just got a whole bunch at GP Milwaukee, so I'm like really excited about that. They're gonna have this nice selection of them. But in the past, I had very few to choose from, and as adults, we just like order online whatever our favorite art is or whatever, and it's extremely thought out. It's a very personal thing. You're gonna plunk this thing down, and you've thought about it a lot, right? But in my game club, the kids just like pick from whatever I get donated, and so it's like, well, Chandra isn't my thing, I guess, but this is the playmat that we have here, so I'll just take that from the prize bucket. I get all the Magic swag and make these prize buckets, and they can pick from by turning in good grades.
That's awesome.
So I was at the Card Kingdom website buying some cards, and I was like browsing through their stuff on sale, and they had a whole bunch of these glorious Teferi playmats, and they were on clearance. So I bought 2 of them to throw into the game for grades prize buckets there. And, they show up, and I plunk them in there, and I bring them out next time. And African-American males make up most of the members of the club. And I hadn't had any playmats or boxes or anything that had this kind of representation before, because I just got what people gave me, and, that hadn't been a representation emphasized up until Teferi, was really celebrated, right? And so I show them, and there are these 2 clubs. There these 2 kids at the club that are just ecstatic. They see this playmat, and they're just like, dude, look at this guy. Like, Teferi is my guy. Like, and they're just so floored and excited, And I see this, and so I start telling them about who Teferi is, and like, oh yeah, man, he's called the hero of Dominaria, and check this out, and this is what he did. He phased out an entire continent, and and they're just like, oh yeah, and so they made me promise that I'd save these playmats just for them, and they had to save up 5 A's to get a playmat, So the next club, they come, they got their 5 A's, and they walk right in, and here we go. Give me my playmat, And it was just such a stunning example of how much representation matters.
Yeah, and I'm sure they hadn't expressed anything like that for any of the other characters previously.
Right? Yeah, I mean, they like the fantasy stuff, but they don't get that kind of representation, And that tweet I made that was. Became kind of viral for me, was, something like, as a person who's been ubiquitously represented in Magic from the beginning of it, it's really easy to underappreciate the experience of having this game you love celebrate someone like you for the first time in your life.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of the gamers playing Magic can't relate to that. It's just always been there from the start, and these kids see Teferi on this huge playmat, just looking awesome, and just lose their minds. Just so excited. It was just awesome, And it's great that Wizards has totally embraced this. It just for everyone to have that experience, for just overall human happiness. It is so awesome, and I just want that replicated for everyone across the breadth of human diversity.
That's our show. You can find the podcast on Twitter @GoblinLorePod, or you can email any questions, comments, or concerns to goblinlorepodcast@gmail.com. This episode was written and produced by Joe Redeman, who you can find on Twitter @Findhorn. That's FYND Horn. Alex Newman co-hosted. You can find him on Twitter @AlexanderNewM. Hobbes Q also co-hosted, who you can find on Twitter @HobbesQ. Mike Lawton can be found on Twitter @MikeWildspeaker, all one word. Follow him for more updates on the high school Magic Club in Milwaukee, and please, if you can, donate any supplies that you are able to. Remember, you can join our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Check us out at patreon.com/GoblinLorePod. Thank you all for listening, and remember, goblins, like snowflakes, are only dangerous in numbers.